All right, this is the mop-up for June 16th, 2024. I'm David Feldman here in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. And if you want to make certain you never miss an episode, the best way is to hit the notifications bell. I don't know where it is, but apparently there's a notifications bell that you can press, and that way you'll be notified every time we go live. If you would like a transcript of today's episode, it's free. Go to shopdavidfeldman.com. It's made possible. These free transcripts are made possible by the listeners who bought my Trump fart filtration mask. You never know when he's coming to a town near you, so you may want to pick up a official Donald Trump fart filtration mask. We have new mugs and t-shirts and refrigerator magnets. Every day we're updating the store just to see what some of you are willing to buy. Some of you have been buying the chef's apron that says, I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea. I don't know why. I've asked you not to. I want to do live shows and meet my audience members in person, but after seeing what some of you have purchased, I don't think I want to meet some of you. The Biden administration unveiled new plans to make it illegal for medical debt to be included in your credit score. In 2020, during Trump's final year in office, 46 million Americans had medical debt that was attached to their credit score, making it harder for them to rent apartments, buy a car, or send their children off to college. The Biden administration's 2021 American Rescue Plan eliminated $7 billion worth of medical debt, thereby improving the credit scores for nearly 3 million Americans. But there's a difference between paying off medical debt, which is impossible, and not allowing medical debt to be factored into your credit score. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, along with our vice president, announced a new proposal last week in which credit agencies would be forbidden from including any and all medical debt from your credit history, and that will raise the credit scores for nearly 50 million Americans by as much as 20 points. Credit scores are not just about borrowing money. Credit scores are what landlords check to see if you'll pay your rent on time. It's what future bosses look at before they hire you. They shouldn't, but they do. Nobody should deny you housing, a job, or the money to borrow for a new car at a reasonable interest rate just because you or someone in your family got sick and vulture capitalists who run our for-profit healthcare system stripped you of everything you had. Now, in New York State, where I live, it is against the law for medical debt, which is the number one cause of bankruptcy in America. It is against the law here in New York State for medical debt to be included in your credit score. So, I live in New York, and this begs an interesting moral dilemma. Given how iniquitous our for-profit healthcare system is, given that it's easier for your doctor to unravel the human genome than it is the billing procedure over at United Healthcare, given that nobody can explain a medical bill, nobody can tell me why a single aspirin costs as much as $70, given that nobody can explain why a COVID test costs $700, why the lab charged my insurer $700 for a COVID test, given that nobody can explain this, especially the people who sent my insurance a bill for said COVID test. And when I wrote and asked for an explanation, radio silence. Given that baked into our for-profit healthcare system is overcharging and overbilling, and that doctors and hospitals pad their bills that they send to health insurance companies because they know they're not going to get reimbursed for what they think they're owed, so they overcharge and hope for the best. Given how corrupt and depraved America's for-profit healthcare system is, how murderously wicked our for-profit healthcare system is, given how it preys on the sick, poor, and the middle class, given how insurance companies play out the clock, betting you'll expire before they have to spring for the medical treatment you need, given all that, I ask all of you listening, if you knew that you could get away with not paying your medical bills and that collection agencies could write you, phone you, threaten you, but there was no way they could jeopardize your credit score. If you knew that owing money to a health insurance company, a hospital, medical group, or eventually the collections agency, if you knew all of this would be mediated by the honor system, how honorable would you be? In other words, if you could get away with not paying these ransom demands, no consequences, would you pay these bills? I'm asking, do you have a moral obligation not to pay these medical bills? What would your God tell you to do? I'm curious. Would your God tell you to pay the hospital that just overcharged you for that CAT scan? Or should you use that money? Would your God tell you to use that money to buy your kids new school clothes? What would your God tell you to do? Where is your moral obligation? Now, I live in New York State where I don't have to pay my medical bills. If I forget to pay a medical bill, it goes into collections, but they can't damage my credit score. Again, I might end up with a bill collector hounding me, but there's nothing they can do in New York to my credit score. What is my moral obligation? Do I have a moral obligation to pay charges that nobody can explain? Or do I have a moral obligation to tie that hospital administrator or the bill collector down in endless paperwork, demanding they itemize what I'm being charged and explain why? And then when they do explain, ask for more explanations. Say, I'm not going to pay this until you explain this. Tie them up, drown them in paperwork. Is that my moral obligation? Is that your moral obligation? And beyond my moral obligation, what is the best use of my time? Instead of paying what they say I owe, is it more cost-effective to invest in a stack of envelopes, a sheet of forever stamps, and leverage 10 minutes a week of my time riding to the hospital, to the medical group, the insurance company politely drowning them in questions they are incapable of answering? What do you think? Now, Joe Biden's Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is proposing to erase all medical debt from your credit score, which means the luxury afforded me in New York will soon be afforded across the nation. I am certain Republicans will try to challenge this in the courts. But this is one of Joe Biden's signature regulatory moves to make life financially easier for ordinary Americans. So tell me, what will be your moral obligation when medical debt is purely between you and the provider, or you and the insurance provider? Are you morally obligated to increase profits for shareholders of United Healthcare? Or are you morally obligated to decide what every other industrialized nation in the world has decided, and that is healthcare is a human right? And when Big Pharma or the health insurance companies try to steal from you, you don't hand it over without a fight. What is our moral obligation? What is the best use of our time? Tell me in the comments section down below. And if you're against Medicare for all, from the bottom of my heart, go F yourself. According to Vangela Wade, writing for The Hill, of the Americans who can't get health care because their states refuse to accept Medicaid expansion, 97% live in deep red southern states. 97% of all Americans who can't get health care because their states refuse to accept Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, they live in deep red Republican states. Wade, Vangela Wade, writing over at The Hill, is also president of the Mississippi Center for Justice. And she writes that nowhere is the health care gap more acute than in her home state of Mississippi, which, according to the Associated Press, has the highest rate of preventable deaths in America. In Mississippi, we have people who aren't dying from disease. They are dying because they can't afford to get their disease treated. That's diseased. Wade over at The Hill writes that because at least 123,000 Mississippians lack the financial resources to visit a doctor, they fall victim to silent killers like cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, which, left untreated, result in early death. She also cites a new Yale study showing that nearly 70,000 Americans will die this year simply because they didn't have adequate health insurance. Now, that doesn't include health insurance companies denying the treatment you need. I'm talking about 70,000 Americans dying each year simply because, insured or not insured, they can't afford to see a doctor. 70,000 Americans each year. More Americans are killed by health insurance companies than by guns, and that's a lot. It has been nearly 14 years since the passage of Obamacare, which offers states block grants to fund their individual Medicaid programs. Remember, Medicare, not Medicaid, Medicare here in America is for seniors, and Medicare is administered by the federal government. Medicaid is for people struggling to pay their bills, and it's funded primarily by the federal government, but administered by the individual states. It should be administered by the federal government. Since the passage of Obamacare, all but 10 states have accepted Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion under Obamacare sends billions of dollars each year to the 42 states that accept it so they can give pretty much free medical care to people who have trouble paying their bills. Back when Obamacare first passed, many, including me, saw Obamacare as a possible gateway to single payer because the federal government would be throwing billions each year towards Medicaid, which in states like New York right now can feel like universal health care if you qualify. I know it's not single payer. I know it's not universal health care. I know there are insurance companies involved. It's not the same thing. But Medicaid in New York is pretty awesome if you qualify. Obamacare was turned into a huge profit center for the health insurance companies because Republicans and the Supreme Court stripped out all the soft entry points into something resembling Medicare or Medicaid for all. For example, the public option, an alternative to for-profit health insurance, that got stripped out of the bill before they even voted on it. And the courts got rid of the individual mandate, which would have forced everyone to get health insurance. And the courts have allowed the states to reject Medicaid expansion. 10 states out of 52 have rejected Medicaid expansion. Why? I don't know. I've heard explanations it has something to do with federal overreach, fear of socialism, not wanting Barack Obama to succeed. It goes in one ear and out the other. I've never heard a reasonable explanation for why a state would reject billions from the federal government to provide health care for their citizens. This is a map from the Kaiser Foundation. You can see the states that reject Medicaid expansion. They're lightly colored, and they are predominantly in the South. It's no surprise these states also lead the country in heart disease, cancer, obesity, infant mortality, diabetes, suicide, gun deaths, and voting against their own best interests by casting ballots for Republicans. These are all Republican-controlled states, except for Wisconsin. It should also be noted that these same red states, which have the highest infant mortality rates, at the same time also have the strictest anti-abortion laws. They demand women bring the fetus to full term, but offer nothing in the way of health care after it's born. Wisconsin and Georgia are the outliers on the map. These are 2 of the 10 states that turned down Medicaid expansion. Joe Biden was able to carry both in 2020. But the other states, 8, including Florida and Texas, have voted consistently red since at least 2012. Look at this map. The states with the sickest people, the unhealthiest people, the states with the lowest test scores, with the most drug overdoses, highest suicide rates, all vote Republican and all reject Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. Now, are they Republican because they're unhealthy, or are they unhealthy because they're Republican? The answer is yes. Republicans win these states by convincing voters to blame their inferiority complexes on blue state coastal elitists. But the truth is, it's Republicans who make these states inferior. It's not an inferiority complex. These states are inferior. All men and women are created equal, but not all state governments are created equal. This is a fact. When you live in a state controlled by Republicans, your life expectancy is shortened. Fact. You are less likely to have access to a doctor, and your social mobility is frozen. due to anti-abortion laws and anti-union laws that now encourage children to drop out of high school so they can support their parents by taking low-wage jobs. In a state like Arkansas, which does accept Medicaid now, but Arkansas is a state where Sarah Huckabee is signing laws that allow children to work in slaughterhouses and on construction sites. The argument isn't that wages are too low to raise a family. Sarah Huckabee's argument, the Republican argument, is school, not college, school isn't for everyone. And children need to pitch in and start putting food on the table by going to work. Again, Arkansas recently began accepting Medicaid expansion. Republicans are all about freedom. But under their rule, citizens always end up less free due to economic hardship. Under Republican rule, there is no freedom. Crime rates go up because desperate people do desperate things, which is why in a state controlled by Republicans, you're more likely to get arrested, do time, get shot, and of course get persecuted because of your religious beliefs, race, or sexual orientation. That is not freedom. These deep red states have convinced voters that you defeat the elitists by engaging in a culture war. But the real elitists, the millionaires and billionaires, they don't care about the culture war. They don't care about abortion, same-sex marriage, or gender-affirming care for minors. They're just paying politicians to convince red state voters to blame all their unhappiness on political correctness or neighbors who look different. Because the last thing the people who control the Republican Party want is their voters to wake up and start blaming the real cause of all their unhappiness, the richest 1%, who keep these red state voters in a permanent state of fear, anger, resentment, and economic immiseration. So yeah, all men and women are created equal, but all state governments are not. If you live in a red state, you think you hate blue state liberals, but you don't. You're jealous. You are jealous. As well, you should be. If you live in Florida, West Virginia, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, even Texas, your quality of life is far worse than it is for people who are lucky enough to live in other parts of this country. That's not because you're inferior. It's because by all statistical yardsticks, your government is. That's because you keep electing Republicans who slash taxes and have you pay for it. So here's a suggestion, my red state friends. Instead of hating on blacks, migrants, Jews, Palestinians, children in need of gender-affirming care, instead of hating the homeless, Muslim, or women in need of reproductive freedom, why don't you get to work and start hating on the people who are depriving you of all your freedom? The richest 1%, who cut funding for government services, like your schools and public universities. They cut funding for schools and public universities so deep that you no longer possess the critical thinking necessary to see through the fog of lies blown your way by fossil fuel funded think tanks, politicians, and news networks. Blue states are not your enemy. Your government is. The people you're voting for are causing all your pain. The CNN debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, scheduled for June 27th in Atlanta, Georgia, is still good to go. I thought maybe Donald Trump would back out. There are new ground rules announced. They were announced on Friday. It has been officially confirmed that there will definitely be no audience. At first, I was surprised Trump agreed to that, but then I realized on last week's show, he probably agreed to no audience because he needs to be spared the embarrassment of Jill Biden sitting in the crowd, but not Melania, who is still reportedly renegotiating her prenup for at least the fifth time. This is true. That's why you don't see her. RFK Jr. is probably not going to qualify for the CNN debate since he's not yet made it on enough state ballots. Trump was in Michigan on Saturday and challenged Joe Biden to take a cognitive test before the debate on CNN. Trump said in front of a packed audience, "I will take this cognitive test again." Trump said, "We should both take this cognitive test." Trump said, "I passed this cognitive test with flying colors when it was administered by my White House physician, Dr. Ronnie Johnson." Trump kept talking Saturday night about that cognitive test administered by Dr. Ronnie Johnson and how Dr. Ronnie Johnson assured Donald Trump he did great on the cognitive test and that his memory was sharp as a 30-year-old's. The only problem is the guy's name is Dr. Ronnie Jackson, not Dr. Ronnie Johnson, but Trump kept referring to him as Dr. Ronnie Johnson. Trump bragging about how great his memory is, bragging about how great he did on Dr. Ronnie Johnson's cognitive test, couldn't remember the name of his personal White House physician, Dr. Ronnie Jackson. This is the same guy who traveled with Donald Trump for 4 years, took care of him when he had COVID, sticked his finger up his you-know-what to check his prostate. I know the name of every man who shoved their gloved finger there. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, the guy Trump was going to put in charge of the VA until all these women came forward and said Dr. Ronnie Jackson was drunk, abusive, and sexually inappropriate, which is why the Navy demoted him 2 or 3 years ago. It just came out. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, when he worked in the White House, was a rear admiral. Like I said, he did the prostate exam. Dr. Ronnie Jackson was a rear admiral, but now he's a captain. He got demoted after the Pentagon conducted an internal investigation and concluded that while Dr. Ronnie Jackson was White House physician in the Trump administration, Dr. Ronnie Jackson would drink heavily and take sleeping pills while he was on the job. And he was abusive towards female subordinates. There are stories about him handing out uppers and downers. He was kind of like the Dr. Nick for the Trump White House. And then they would all travel together, and he would party a little too hard and start pounding on attractive staffers' doors at 4 a.m. Well, after he was demoted and couldn't run the VA, he had no choice but to become a United States congressman from Texas. And he still refers to himself as a rear admiral, but he's not. He was demoted. I think he was demoted 3 years ago, but we just found out about it. Dr. Ronny Jackson, Republican congressman from Texas, is now a captain because he abused alcohol, pills, and the people who worked under him inside the Trump White House. You would think Donald Trump would remember, of all people, Dr. Ronny Jackson, his doctor. But no. Saturday night, when he was bragging about how great his memory was, he cited a cognitive test administered by Dr. Ronny Jackson, who he called Dr. Ronny Johnson. Meanwhile, for the debate, each candidate's microphone will be muted when it's not their turn to speak. I'm starting to believe we should mute both candidates' microphones even when it is their turn to speak. Supposedly, muting the microphones will prevent them from talking over one another. And also, muting Trump's microphone will make it easier for Biden not to be distracted by one of Donald Trump's leaky trombone farts. He won't be distracted by the sound. He won't hear one of those. But from what I hear, people have to deal with the stench. You know, it's not a joke. It's a very aggressive, he's very aggressive with his flatulence, Trump. Now, I understand before the debate, Biden is planning to dip his face in bee pollen, hoping the hay fever will diminish his sense of smell. I don't think that's true. I made that up. But this is true. Biden went to Camp David for some debate prep, but Trump is reportedly planning to just wing it, which is exactly what his 4 years as president was like. He was just winging it. He was unprepared. Both of these men have not debated in 4 years. The debate will last 90 minutes or until Biden, Jake Tapper, or Dana Bash can no longer stand Trump's fetid stench. There will be 2 commercial breaks, but candidates will not be permitted to meet with their staffers during those breaks, which means Trump will have to snort his own Adderall and change his diaper by himself. The candidates will not be permitted to bring any prepared notes to the podium. There will be no opening statements. However, the debate will conclude with each candidate delivering closing remarks. I'll be hosting a debate watch party on Zoom, and it'll be kind of like a town hall where we'll watch it together, and then I'll record an audio version of my podcast where I'll take your calls. We're gearing up for this. I'll have more details in the coming days. I hope you all can make it. Let's turn to the Pew Research Center, which oddly enough is not going to be the name of Donald Trump's presidential library. The Pew Research Center. The Pew Research Center is reporting that Biden and Trump are the most disliked candidates in at least 30 years. A majority of Americans from both sides of the political spectrum say they wish 2 other candidates were running. This is a chart from Axios, and it shows the percentage of what are called double haters dating back to 1988. What's a double hater? A double hater is someone who hates candidates that both the Republicans and the Democrats have nominated. Okay? That's how stacked our system is against a third-party candidate. If you don't like the Democratic nominee and the Republican nominee, and you're planning on voting for somebody like Jill Stein, you're a double hater. If you're voting for a third-party candidate like Jill Stein, you're a double hater. If you're voting for Bobby Kennedy Jr., that would make you a quadruple hater. But let me see if I can go large here. This is kind of interesting. Look at how dissatisfied the electorate is. 25%, 1 out of every 4 voters, now wishes 2 other candidates were running. And that is the largest number of double haters since they began keeping track of double haters. The second worst year was 2016, where 1 out of 5 voters hated both candidates. That would be Hillary and Donald Trump. And back in 1988, only 5%. You had Herbert Walker Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush running against Michael Dukakis. Only 5% of the voters wished the 2 parties were running somebody else. Americans are dissatisfied with every institution, and it's growing worse and worse. Donald Trump turned 78 on Friday, once again proving prayers don't work. Birthday wishes came in from far and wide. Ivanka, Eric, and Don Jr., even Don Jr.'s ex-wife. They all took to social media to publicly wish Donald Trump a happy 78th birthday. But one person didn't wish Donald a happy birthday. Melania. For some reason, and I wouldn't venture a guess, but for some reason, Melania didn't wish Donald Trump a happy birthday. You think maybe she forgot? I don't know. But you know what? I think she's mad at him. You know how wives are. Donald he's got a lot on his mind. He's probably been a little distant lately. But with this being the heat of a presidential campaign, he's got the big debate coming up. I bet she feels a little neglected by him. And I think that's why she didn't wish him a happy birthday. I suspect she misses him. I suspect she didn't want him to run again. She didn't want to share him. I think she resents the fact that he's running for president again, and she's got to share him with the American people. I suspect just when she was beginning to enjoy life out of the White House with Donald, the 2 of them were out of the limelight. I think she envisioned that the 2 of them would grow older together. And then he got pulled back into politics. America was calling. And I suspect she's angry that she has to share Donald. I suspect she didn't wish him a happy birthday because she misses him. That's it. Sometimes we love someone so much, we want to be with them all the time. And if they prioritize political ambition over family, resentment can set in. We often end up getting the angriest with the people we love the most. And that's why I think Melania Trump didn't wish Donald a happy 78th birthday. I think that's it. Or maybe it's because a jury earlier this year ordered Donald to pay $83 million to a woman he raped. That could also be it. Or maybe because 2 weeks ago a jury found Donald guilty of paying hush money to a porn star he had unprotected sex with just weeks after Melania gave birth to their son. Maybe that's why Melania didn't wish him a happy birthday. No. She loves him too much. She doesn't want to share Donald. She's mad because she's not spending enough time with Donald. I mean, why would a wife be angry with her husband just because the entire world now knows he's an adjudicated rapist who had unprotected sex with a porn star just weeks after the wife gave birth to their son? What wife would be upset about him having a year-long affair with the Playboy playmate Karen McDougal while Melania was pregnant with their son? Wives don't get upset about that. She misses him. That's why she didn't wish him a happy 78th. Well, Donald celebrated his birthday Friday. at the Palm Beach County Convention Center, where supporters paid $25 a head to wish him well. Trump was welcomed, as always, onto the stage to the pre-recorded, pulsating, homoerotic sounds of the Village People's Macho Man pumping throughout the auditorium. Trump loves the Village People. You know that. We've talked about this. At all his rallies, he has them play YMCA, In the Navy, and Macho Man. And I always wonder, who is Donald Trump's favorite member of the Village People? Who does he secretly fantasize about being? Well, I looked into it. I found some pictures. When Donald was younger, he would often show up at Studio 54 dressed as the construction worker. But then he realized if he's a construction worker, that meant his father was going to stiff him. There'd be no money. So he dumped the construction worker. And Donald decided to come to Studio 54 dressed as the cop from the Village People. But he ended up ditching that idea when Roy Cohn wouldn't stop trying to fillet him. Then Donald Trump came dressed to Studio 54 as the Admiral until his bone spurs acted up and he needed a note from his doctor. And finally, Donald Trump settled on showing up to Studio 54 dressed as the Indian chief, because the Algonquins sold Manhattan to the Dutch for $24, and that's $24 more than Donald Trump ever made in New York real estate. Wow. Sorry about that. Sometimes you work with a little AI and you think something's going to be funny, and wow, yes. You know, I just took a sip of coffee, and I think the people who hate hearing me sip coffee compared to that Village People run, I think the sound of the sipping coffee is the least of their concern. Well, again, I'm sorry. That stunk so bad I have to put on one of my Donald Trump fart filtration masks, available at shopdavidfeldman.com, where you can pick up a Donald Trump Scream coffee mug. Isn't that great? An Uncle Scam coffee mug. What do we have? A free Harvard diploma, or maybe a coffee mug from Harvard. It's misspelled, but as is this coffee mug from the my nephew Leonard. Didn't check the spelling, so now I've got a warehouse filled with David Ferdman Show, coffee mugs and T-shirts. And don't go to shopdavidfeldman.com. It just encourages me. Although it is kind of interesting to see what people might buy. Somebody bought, there's a throw pillow with Rudy Giuliani's face on, just a photograph of Rudy Giuliani's face. And someone bought it. And I went, wow. It's kind of anthropologically interesting to see what people... Honestly, that's all I want to do, is just make this garbage and see what people will buy. Don't do it. It's bad for the environment. Anyway, what was I talking about? Donald Trump's birthday party. According to the New York Times, Trump didn't appear happy at his big birthday bash, and neither did many in the crowd. This is true. Reportedly, there was a lot of pushing and shoving and cursing as the people in the crowd, oddly enough, try to get closer to the stage. I would think they would be pushing, cursing, and shoving to get away from the stench. But, these Trumps, how like moths are attracted to flames? Trump supporters are like houseflies attracted to the cat shit. If you've ever had cats and you don't change the box, the houseflies find a place to land. And that's what Trump voters are like. They're like houseflies attracted to crap. Speaking of which, Kellyanne Conway was at Donald Trump's 78th birthday. Donald Trump has come to forgive Kellyanne for all the leaking she did inside the White House, and Kellyanne has agreed to forgive Donald for all the leaking he did in his pants. Kellyanne got up and spoke at Donald Trump's 78th. She wished Donald a happy 78th, adding she can't believe he's 77 years old. He looks great for a man who just turned 65, said Kellyanne Conway. Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio, who was hoping to be Trump's running mate, also showed up for his 78th birthday. Now, of the 5 candidates on Trump's shortlist, I believe, politically speaking, Marco Rubio would be the smartest pick. He's experienced, he's sharp, quick-witted, and he understands policy. He really does. Plus, he's Cuban, which is kind of like being Hispanic if you don't pay attention to Florida politics. Marco Rubio would placate what's left of the old guard conservative wing of the GOP, which is why Trump won't pick him. Trump, from what I understand, and who knows, but from what I'm hearing, Trump wants to pick a woman or an African American. The problem is every Republican woman and every Republican African American is certifiably batshit crazy. Trump wants to surprise us. He wants the big reveal. And I don't think his choice for vice president is going to be anyone we think he's going to pick. Byron Donalds is the black congressman from Florida. And he's, if you're looking for a vice president and you're Republican, he's pretty good. He's shown a willingness to debase himself. But at the same time, Congressman Byron Donalds stood up to Ron DeSantis and the Florida school administrators. He stood up to their new teaching standards that require middle school students to be taught that slavery had some benefits for black people. That's what it takes to be a courageous black Republican, to have the temerity to say slavery was a bad thing. That's what it takes to be a courageous black Republican. I can go along with you on a lot of things, but when you say slavery was a good thing, that's where I draw the line. But Byron Donalds, as far as Republicans go, is pretty sharp. Then there's Elise Stefanik, J.D. Vance, and Tim Scott, who are all unlikable. Stefanik is a Harvard-educated New Yorker. She's an opinionated woman who is going to alienate Trump's misogynist base. Tim Scott is supposedly getting married, finally, but we'll see if he goes through with the marriage when Trump doesn't pick him as his vice president. And J.D. Vance has a long paper trail of disloyalty to Donald Trump. And he is starting to look more and more like what he is, an opportunistic infection. I doubt J.D. Vance, Elise Stefanik, or Tim Scott will be picked. I go back to Florida. Byron Donalds is from Florida. So is Rubio. And Florida is in play because of abortion. Abortion's on the ballot. Biden is within striking distance. So it wouldn't be the worst idea for Trump to pick a running mate from Florida. And we've been over this. There's nothing in the Constitution that prevents a president and a vice president from being from the same state. It just only gets complicated if it gets thrown into the House of Representatives, which is a possibility, but there's nothing that prevents Trump from picking a Floridian. So, again, the smart move is either Rubio or Byron Donalds, but Trump doesn't make smart moves. Here is what my gut tells me. This is what I'm going to predict. Trump will seal his doom by whomever he picks. The same way John McCain lost in 2008 because he picked Sarah Palin. I mean, that was disloyal. When he picked Sarah Palin, Republicans asked, does this guy love this country? It was the height of irresponsibility for John McCain to pick Sarah Palin. And I think Trump is going to pick someone like Sarah Palin, who won't upstage him, someone who will do what they're told, and when time comes, they'll put the noose around their own neck without hiding in the bowels of the Capitol the way Mike Pence did. I don't know who he's going to pick. Again, Rubio is the smartest move if you're trying to win an election and appear responsible. But I don't know who it will be. But it will be someone horrible. Way worse than Mike Pence, if such a thing is possible. I'm going to guess it's going to be, and this is just, I think he's going to pick a retired general who nobody knows anything about. A retired military guy or woman with absolutely zero paper trail. Someone who would be respected by both parties. That's my guess. He's not going to pick a professional politician. He's not going to pick anybody from corporate America. I am going to predict he's going to choose a low-profile but well-respected member of the armed forces. That's what I predict. Or Amy Cooper, that Karen who called the cops on the black bird watcher in Central Park 4 years ago. I think it's either going to be a retired member of our military or Amy Cooper, the one who called the cops on that black bird watcher 4 years ago in Central Park. Like I said, Marco Rubio spoke at Trump's birthday and addressed the crowd. He said, quote, "Sometimes I think, why is this guy doing this? Really, Marco? You don't know why he's doing this? To stay out of prison, to keep the Russian mobsters he stole from at bay. That's really the reason he ran in 2016. It's hard for Putin and ex-KGB agents to come after you when you got Secret Service protection. And it's easier to get them to back off if you're willing to pay them back with state secrets instead of cash. That's why he's running." Rubio went on to say, quote, "Trump had a great life. He didn't need to be in politics." Well, yes, he did, Marco Rubio. He needed to be in politics. That was all that was left for him. He was broke. Nobody would do business with him. Nobody would lend him money. And the truth is, had Trump been nominated in 2016 but lost in 2016, his life would be great right now. He would have been able to cash in on what might have been. Instead, we found out what might have been. 1 million dead from COVID and the single worst financial collapse since the Great Depression. I love how MAGA supporters always say, "Oh, it's not 2020 is a mulligan. That he was doing great until COVID." You don't get a mulligan for COVID. It's the same way George W. Bush supporters used to say, "He kept us safe from terrorists," except for 9/11, the single worst attack on our nation's soil. Except for 9/11, he kept us safe from terror. It's not fair to include 9/11. Yes, it is. It's not fair to include COVID. Yes, it is. These Republicans, they want the death penalty for poor people, but when they screw up, it's one mulligan after another. It's so unfair. The economy would have been great if Trump didn't crap the bed on COVID. Even before COVID, the economy was on its way down. I showed you the graphs. The sugar high from the 2017 tax cuts for the rich, that sugar high was ending, and in the lead up to COVID, the rate of growth in our economy was heading downwards. We weren't in a recession, but the rate of growth was slowing down. So Trump's economy wasn't so great. And then, of course, he ignored COVID and had no idea what to do. Again, because of Donald Trump, America had the most deaths from COVID. More deaths than any other country in the world. More deaths in overall numbers of dead and more dead per capita. No leader mishandled COVID worse than Donald Trump did. And the Trump supporters say, but what about Operation Warp Speed? What about the vaccine? He developed the vaccine. Okay, so that means the vaccine is safe, and it's the reason COVID is no longer the national emergency it once was. So are you saying the vaccine is a good thing? No. Yeah, so shut the F up. Anyway, Rubio went on to say, quote, there's only one reason why someone like Trump would be in politics. One reason, with all these hassles, with all these things he has to put up with, there's only one reason Donald Trump entered politics. And what do you think that reason is, folks? Well, the truth is, he entered politics because there are millions of low information Republican cretins willing to send money to Trump's super PAC, which he can then spend on lawyers. He can funnel that money into hundreds of shell companies that provide fraudulent goods and services to the Republican Party. He can spend that money on Melania's hair and makeup, as well as the divorce settlement. That is why he went into politics. There's a lot of money in politics. Donald Trump's Save America PAC raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars after he left office, and nobody knows where it went. We know he spent $100 million on lawyers, but nobody knows where the rest of it went. And that's why he went into politics. It is the perfect scam. I tell lies, and you send me money. That's why he went into politics. But not according to Marco Rubio. No, according to Marco Rubio, at Donald Trump's 78th birthday party, Trump went into politics because, quote, he loves America. And he wants to save it from people that want to destroy it. Trump loves America. That's why he enlisted in the army during Vietnam. That's why he called the soldiers lying in Arlington Cemetery heroes. Actually, he didn't fight in Vietnam, and he called the soldiers lying in Arlington Cemetery losers and suckers. That's how much he loves America. Donald Trump loves America so much he owes the IRS at least $300 million that we know of. Donald Trump loves America so much he ate a cheeseburger and fries while watching Fox News as his mob of illiterate half-wits destroyed the Capitol, because he loves America that much. And he wants to save it from the people who are trying to destroy it. You know, like Vladimir Putin. Speaking of January 6th, Trump paid a visit to our Capitol for the first time since the insurrection. They finally got the defecation stench out of Statuary Hall, and then he has to show up. Just when they got the stench out, Trump shows up. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell shook Trump's hand in a meeting of Capitol Hill Republicans. McConnell had not spoken to Trump since January 6th, which McConnell said repeatedly Trump was, quote, materially responsible for January 6th. During the subsequent impeachment trial for January 6th, Mitch McConnell voted against convicting Donald Trump. McConnell said since Trump was no longer president, it should be left to the courts to convict Donald Trump for January 6th. That's what Mitch McConnell said. We should leave it to the courts. But the court still hasn't made up its mind as to whether or not an ex-president can be tried for crimes he committed while in the Oval Office. The Supreme Court just can't seem to make up its mind as to whether or not America is a dictatorship. They can't seem to figure out whether presidents possess the divine rights of kings. It's been nearly 2 months since Trump's lawyer said during oral arguments on presidential immunity that a president could lead a coup against America and can't be prosecuted after it fails. Trump's lawyer said that before the Supreme Court, and our court just can't make up its mind. It's been 2 months. They can't decide. They were able to overturn the ban on bump stocks last week. They decided to essentially legalize machine guns last week. They were able to do that. They upheld the FDA's right to approve use of the abortion pill. They were able to do that. They sided with Starbucks last week in a dispute with Biden's National Labor Relations Board over the firing of union activists. Those issues they were able to decide on. But whether America is a fascist state, their mind is boggled. They can't figure it out. Meanwhile, Don Jr. has come under fire for posting a bigoted and tasteless Instagram story, mocking his younger and equally stupid brother Eric for wearing white pants. Don Jr., making fun of his brother's white pants, wrote, quote, "I know it's Pride Month, but WTF, bro?" Don Jr. thinks the color white is gay. And if that's the case, considering the amount of time Don Jr. has spent bent over a mirror, shoving white stuff into his face, that would make him Clay Aiken. At least so I've heard. I don't know for a fact as to whether or not Don Jr. self-medicates. But that's what I keep hearing. That's what people keep saying. That's what I've heard me say. Why would I say it if it weren't true? I don't know if Don Jr. is on something, but look at this picture. I ran this picture through Photoshop. I adjusted his eyes. I made them much smaller, and it looks like he's on something. And then I shrunk his head. I made his ears look too big. Doesn't it look now like he's on something? I'm not saying he's on something. I'm just asking, why would I have altered this photo to make it look like Don Jr. is on something if he weren't on something? It wouldn't make any sense. Again, I hope Don Jr. isn't on anything. But why would somebody like me go to all the effort of finding a picture of Don Jr., learning Photoshop, and then altering his face to make it look like he's on something if he weren't on something? Doesn't this photo of Don Jr. that I altered, doesn't this photo of Don Jr. altered to make it look like he's on something look like he's on something? Again, I hope he's sober. I hope he's clean. But judging from this photo that I put through Photoshop to make it look like he's on something, it sure looks to me like he's on something. I hope not. Don Jr. was in Europe last week. He hosted a Trump fundraiser in London for wealthy Americans living abroad. Those are the perfect Trump supporters. Wealthy American citizens who won't live in America. What do they care what happens, right? Those are Trump's biggest supporters. Rich Americans who gave up on this place. Don Jr. has become the kingmaker in MAGA world. He's got daddy's ear now. He's a low-rent Jared. He finally has gotten the respect that he's always wanted. He's making big decisions inside the Republican Party, which is why they are going to lose so bad. They're going to lose so bad because Don Jr. is a moron. Attending the Trump fundraiser in London was Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, formerly known as the Brexit Party. That is the face of Nigel Farage. I didn't run it through Photoshop. I don't think. Maybe I did. Yeah, I must have. I must have altered that face. That can't be. Anyway, Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is said to be wealthier than the royal family, is probably on his way out of 10 Downing Street. British elections are July 4th, and the Labour Party is expected to win big, partly because Farage's Reform UK party seems to be siphoning off votes away from the Tories. Farage is a spoiler. He's like Robert Kennedy Jr. If instead of Robert Kennedy Jr. being a descendant of JFK, he was a descendant of KKK. In some polls, Farage's crypto-fascist party outperforms the ruling Conservative Party, as Farage poaches more and more anti-immigrant authoritarians. Farage, seen here showing supporters that if you extend your index finger just right, then technically it's not a Zig Heil. Farage is now claiming to be the real opposition party to Labour. This is a bad guy. This guy belongs here in America. The Guardian reports that Farage's history of anti-Semitic, pro-Hitler, and racist comments have, for the most part, been underreported. For the most part. But those who have known him for years, who have worked closely with Nigel Farage, are now describing him as a deeply unembarrassed racist. You know, a conservative Republican, which is why Don Jr. is hanging with him. He's making alliances with the Brexit people, which has been a failure. Don Jr., the kingmaker, was also in Budapest. On Thursday of last week, he met with Hungary's far-right authoritarian leader, Viktor Orban. The Logan Act forbids American citizens from negotiating with foreign leaders. Don Jr. is now being accused of violating the Logan Act because he held high-level talks with Viktor Orban on how to improve American and Hungarian relations without anyone from the State Department sanctioning such a meeting. Viktor Orban, like Nigel Farage, is an inveterate racist and authoritarian who is anti-immigrant and unabashedly has warned Hungarians not to dilute their gene pool by marrying those without Hungarian blood. 2 years ago, Viktor Orban spoke to Hungarians living in Romania and warned against mixing of the races. He believes the Hungarian people are a race. Like Farage, like Hitler, like Trump, Viktor Orban is a nationalist who defends his nation's blood and soil. It's straight out of the authoritarian fascist playbook. Orban, who spoke at CPAC 2 years ago, is funding a transatlantic alliance between his party and American conservatives, Republicans. Orban funds the work of some American conservatives who are willing to promote racist, authoritarian, illiberal policies that marginalize the LGBTQ community and promote America as a white Christian ethno-nationalist state. We do know that Viktor Orban's party has business ties with Putin, which is why Putin moved the headquarters of Russia's International Investment Bank to Budapest. This bank is referred to as Putin's spy bank. It is said to be funding Russian intelligence operations throughout the West. We know Putin provided some of the funding for Brexit. We know he has been sending money to far-right authoritarian parties in France, Marine Le Pen, and throughout Western Europe. It's a safe bet that some, if not all, of the money Putin is distributing to far-right organizations in the West, in America, including the National Rifle Association and the Republican Party, we know that those donations from Putin, those donations were run through Russia's International Investment Bank, which is now headquartered in Hungary. Hungary isn't just an authoritarian nation run by Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban isn't Poland. This isn't Italy, which is seeing a rise in fascism. Viktor Orban is a direct link between Vladimir Putin and the West. We know Orban receives funding from Putin, which is why Hungary, a member of both NATO and the EU, has come under heavy criticism from member states for its unabashed support of Vladimir Putin, as well as its resistance towards offering military and financial support to Ukraine in its war against Russia. Viktor Orban is a surrogate for Putin in the West. It's why Vladimir Putin, it's why Tucker Carlson was constantly having Orban on his show. It's why Orban spoke at CPAC 2 years ago. And it's why Don Jr. met personally with Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban and MAGA go all the way back to Steve Bannon, who supposedly reports to prison on July 1st. Steve Bannon was one of the first MAGA people to open relations with Hungary because Bannon's a white nationalist. Now, a Western nation like America, especially America, you cannot have Putin, Trump, or Don Jr. showing obedience to Vladimir Putin anymore. Ever since the invasion of Ukraine, you can't show obedience, unless you're Marjorie Taylor Greene. But what you can do is send your idiot son, Don Jr., to Budapest. What you can do is go out of your way to have Don Jr. visit Hungary and meet with Viktor Orban, because a meeting with Viktor Orban is a meeting with Vladimir Putin. Sending his idiot son to meet with Viktor Orban was Trump's way of telling Putin, the war in Ukraine will be different once I return to the Oval Office. When you meet with Orban, when you praise Hungary, that is a signal, a dog whistle that you're part of the pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party. While Big Brother Don Jr. was sucking up to the racists in Hungary and the United Kingdom, Baby Brother Eric was on Fox News talking about how the black community here in America is starting to take a second look at Donald Trump. I've been over this. Republicans love telling us that the black voter is abandoning Biden because they can relate to Trump. And why? When you ask them why, their answer is so transparently racist. Some Republicans have literally said on Fox News, once Donald Trump began selling sneakers, black people fell in love with him. I thought I was watching a comedy show. It was on Laura Ingraham. I played the clip. And other Republicans say, it's the mugshot. Black people, once Trump got the mugshot, black people were all in. Seriously, this is what they say. Here is the brilliant Eric Trump with what I think is one of the all-time greatest Freudian slips while courting the black vote. I wasn't sure if I was going to play this, so I'm only going to play this once. And I'm almost reluctant to play this. I'm only playing it once. If you miss it, tough. It's offensive. But this is what happens to a racist like Eric Trump, who was raised by a racist, his father, who was raised by Fred Trump, who was a member of the KKK. This is what happens when you don't have any psychological help. You let things slip and give away the entire game. I'm only playing this once. Here he is talking about how black people are coming over to Trump.
For the first time, they realize that the system's coming down, that he's the victim. He's the victim that oftentimes some of their communities were. And you see them swing. You look at the African-American vote, right? That's swinging over to Donald Trump in spades. Look at.
Okay. I almost didn't play that. I mean, that is just. Then there's Rudy Giuliani, who on Friday called Fani Willis, the black district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, a hoe. Twice he called her a hoe. I can't imagine why Rudy Giuliani keeps losing in the courts. This is the woman who indicted him for election interference, and he's calling her a hoe. Rudy just turned 80, and it's time to take away his car keys and his mouth. So here is Rudy Giuliani Friday night in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, speaking before a crowd at Grace Christian Church as part of the Reawaken America tour. And Eric Trump, who has become a devout Christian, often speaks at these Reawaken America tours. And the Reawaken America tour was started by General Michael Flynn, who Barack Obama warned Trump not to appoint as his national security advisor because Michael Flynn, according to Barack Obama, was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I don't think Barack Obama said cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but when he was meeting with Trump in 2016, he said, stay away from Michael Flynn. He's not all there. Flynn was appointed National Security Advisor, and he ended up, he only lasted a couple of Scaramucci's, and he ended up getting pardoned by Trump after he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI after they were looking into proof, recorded phone conversations that General Michael Flynn had violated the Logan Act. He was negotiating with Russia before Trump took office. The FBI intercepted a phone call where Michael Flynn was telling the Russians to ignore Barack Obama's sanctions imposed for interfering in our elections. Remember, Trump got elected president. There was proof that Putin was tampering with our democracy. There were economic sanctions, and Michael Flynn was appointed National Security Advisor. But before he and Trump took office, he called the Russian ambassador and said, don't worry about these sanctions that Obama has imposed. Once we're in charge, we're going to lift those sanctions. You're not allowed to do that. But Republicans do this all the time. Henry Kissinger in '68 went to the Paris peace talks and said to the South Vietnamese, don't make a deal with the North Vietnamese. Wait till Nixon becomes president. You'll get a better deal. And George Herbert Walker Bush met with the Iranians in 1980 and said, keep the hostages. Don't release them until after the election. You'll get a better deal if Reagan's president. That's what they do all the time. Republicans constantly violate the Logan Act. Anyway, Michael Flynn was all in on the Stop the Steal movement. Sidney Powell was his attorney. He was the one who brought Sidney Powell into the Stop the Steal movement. He was in on the meetings where they talked immediately after Biden won. They talked about having the military seize the ballot boxes. He has publicly sworn an oath to QAnon. He's not all there. Barack Obama was right, and he has gone all in on QAnon and this weird iteration of Christianity. And here is Rudy Giuliani addressing this crowd of deeply religious Christians in the suburbs of Detroit. I believe this was Friday. Here is Rudy Giuliani calling Fani Willis a hoe.
Then I've got two prosecutors, Fanny the hoe, I'm sorry. Fani? Where's Fani? Now, F-A-N-I is not Fani, and I'm not calling her Fani. I could drop the whole part if she just quit and go away. But to me, you spell your name F-A-N-I. You're Fanny. You're not Fani.
This is the former mayor of New York City who made it illegal because of stop and frisk for black people to leave their homes in New York City. The stuff the way he referred to the mother and daughter election workers, the black women who sued and won that defamation lawsuit, the terms he used to describe them. A racist is a racist is a racist. And this is a group of Christians, deeply religious Christians, laughing at his calling Fani Willis a hoe. That was in Michigan, where Republicans are courting the black vote. On Saturday, Donald Trump visited Michigan and spoke to a black church in Detroit. And in his speech, Trump described Detroit the same way he describes any city with a large black population, the way he describes Milwaukee. He met with the Republicans in the Capitol, and he said, why are we holding our convention in Milwaukee? It's a hellhole. What he means is they've got a black mayor. He called Detroit hell, and he calls it corrupt. Any city that has a black DA or a black mayor, a large black population, he goes right to it's a hellhole and it's nonstop crime. Okay? He warned the people of Detroit that undocumented immigrants are pouring into Michigan and taking away your jobs. Well, the truth is Donald Trump is a liar. He is a liar. 4 years ago at this time, the unemployment rate for black people living in Michigan was 18%. Today, it is 6%. Undocumented immigrants aren't taking away your job. As for crime, yes, Detroit does have a problem with crime. It does have one of the highest violent crime rates in the country. But under Biden, it is coming down dramatically. According to the most recent statistics on crime in Detroit, 2023 had the lowest homicide rate in 57 years. Detroit had the lowest homicide rate in 57 years last year, and it saw a double-digit decline in shootings and carjackings. Why? Because Joe Biden marched with the auto workers. Joe Biden is creating jobs. See this? It's the latest poll of black voters. 81% are voting for Joe Biden because Republicans are racist. You heard Eric Trump. You heard Rudy. And one more time, listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Donald Trump can lie all he wants. He's not getting the black vote. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is the Republican Party.
We have Jamie Raskin in there accusing us of worshiping Trump, worshiping as a convicted felon. Well, yeah, so is George Floyd and everybody, and you all too. The media worship George Floyd. Democrats worship George Floyd. There were riots burning down the fucking country over George Floyd.
There you go. This is why Donald Trump's not getting the black vote. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. I should mention that Rudy has his own brand of coffee that's out, and the partner in the coffee business has gone bankrupt. But over at shopdavidfeldman.com, I've put out Rudy's coffee mugshot coffee mugs. I'm thinking of putting people's mugshots on coffee mugs and calling it coffee mugshots. So I put Rudy's mugshot on a black coffee mug. I think that looks pretty good. Don't buy it. And my son came up with this. It's a picture of Socrates saying, "Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my poonis?" Socrates. My son came up with that, and I actually sold, I think 2 people bought the "Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my poonis" Socrates cup. When I told my son that some people bought this, he came up with the new Socrates. Is this well, okay. All right, this is funny. His girlfriend thought it was funny. So he wrote, "Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my poonis?" And he thought a matching cup should be, "Why do I pee out my pussy but don't poo out my PC?" So I think matching cups, a picture of Socrates, he said, put a picture of Ayn Rand saying, why do I pee out my pussy, but I don't poo out my PC. But we did sell one or two, why do I pee out my penis, but don't poo out my punis coffee mugs. Don't do this. This is taking me down. I'm an addict and I have obsessive behavior. This is nice. This is still a Democrat coffee mug. I kind of like that. With the it's a broken heart. Still a Democrat. It's a coffee mug. Also a T-shirt with you could buy that, and you can go to that website shopdavidfeldman.com for free transcripts. You get your free Harvard diploma. You can pick up World's Creepiest Stepdad coffee mugs. This one, I am really disappointed. It's the chef's apron that says, I hope you're in the mood for for diarrhea. And I have to say, a couple of people bought this. I thought I had a more sophisticated audience that would buy something like this, a coffee cup that says made in Los Estados Unidos. Don't buy the I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea chef's aprons. Don't do that. It's not good. My nephew Leonard gave him my credit card. Now I got a warehouse filled with David Ferdman Show hoodies, T-shirts, and coffee mugs. So where are they? Got to unload the David Ferdman Show. That's Leonard's work. And an appeal to heaven. You know, this is the flag that the Alitos fly over their vacation home. An appeal to heaven. You want this for July 4th. An appeal to these nuts. So it's a flag. Wave it proudly. If you're going to be, I don't know, going to a Mike Johnson rally, if you're going to be around conservatives, pick up an appeal to these nuts flag over at shopdavidfeldman.com. Free transcripts over at shopdavidfeldman.com. We're going to do a June 27th watch party. I'll have more information on that. And pick up your Trump fart filtration masks. This is what I find. I do, like, I'm not selling a lot, but it's interesting that to see what you can get people to buy. Like somebody bought this grotesque throw pillow with Rudy Giuliani's face on it. I couldn't sleep. I saw that. I could not. It kept me up all night. My head was spinning. I just didn't understand why would I sell it, and why would somebody buy it? All right. Thank you to Bob in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. Hit the bell, whatever that means, the notifications button, so that you always know when there's a new episode. Please hit the like button. Please share this. If there was anything in this, that's the best way to help me. Don't buy anything over at the store. If you really want to help me, just share this episode. Okay. But if you want to know what's really going on inside my head, go to Shop. If you want to, I'm going to do an X-rated version of this store. My son and his friends and I have been jawboning some ideas that are really offensive. Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to do a show. I'm going to try to do more shows next week. Thank you so much for listening.